Right, so good afternoon everyone. So welcome to our Red Team Village talk, initial payload development. So the ones that gets away. So first, our agenda. I'll be talking about payload development. We'll be also discussing payload chains and how we conduct a proper chain of execution when it comes to red team. So first, who am I? So I'm Ian Secretario. I'm the founder and lead instructor for Guidem. I'm also part of Hack Street Boys and as well as the Red Teaming Village. So just a couple of certs out there. Right, so the goal of this talk is to provide additional tradecrafts, give some tips and advices on how you can conduct proper initial access operations as well. So it's not just about like having initial access or a click, but also to provide additional techniques so that the initial payload that was delivered doesn't get reported. So first and foremost, we need to define our goals and objectives. So this is just some mindset that we need to think about. So for example, if we want our initial access to be more of like harvesting, credential harvesting, we must think that it's about like fish to harvest. The goal is to gather credentials. So examples of this are the traditional scam pages, wherein we gather credentials, we use fake login portals, site spoofing, and so on. So fish to access, gaining an authorized entry based on our shell. So our goal is to get shell access. So examples of this are file attachments, macros. So our goal is to have that reverse shell. So it's not really a term, fish to persist, but this is more about the mindset. We need to think about our payload to not be reported or detected. So what's the threat landscape back then in 2022? So this is from the FIR report, wherein they saw that initial access is through the following: Excel file, Word file, ISO file, and zip file. So the threat actors that use these techniques are the following. So I won't go through all of them, but as long as you have the slides, you can see that it is still prevalent. So the top 10 delivery of payloads, we have the following. Again, this is back in 2021 and 2022. So observation so far. So we have seen that HTML smuggling is a thing. So later on I'll discuss blockers for HTML smuggling. We have login portals, of course, the traditional ones, the easy ones that get phished, or when they have weak user awareness training, right? So embedded files, calendar invites, zip, ISO, and LNK. So I've put there like maybe because it still depends on the kill chain or the strategy of the operator. So what's the red team's dilemma? So initial access in 2022 and 2023 is really challenging. So there are improvements when it comes to security controls. Especially defenders get better at detecting payloads. We have Defender Smart Screen, Mark of the Web, proxies, web filters. So it's a good thing for overall security. It's a challenging world for red teams because we need to be aware on how to bypass these security controls. So sidestepping into our payload options. So we have executables, of course, the traditional ones, EXE, SER, DLLs, and some others. So our options, we can back off or obfuscate those binaries, backdoor legitimate ones, depending on our goals and objectives. So we have too many options of how we can deliver or what payload options we would deliver. So in this slide, we won't be able to cover all of it, but there is a good talk about the extension or file extension options. So we'll be discussing about one of my favorites and one of the most effective ones, MSI. So has anyone here like installed an MSI package from the internet? Zoom installer? Anyone? None? So yes, okay. So MSI installers is like an executable, but it is a package. So when you install a software or application, similar to the following. So there are so many MSI applications or MSI installers available. Does any one of you experience visiting WebEx or downloading WebEx MSI? None? Someone? Yes? So if you ever go to Cisco and download WebEx, you will have a warning of Smart Screen Defender, even though it's a legitimate application. So the same behavior if you backdoor Cisco WebEx. If you backdoor Cisco WebEx MSI installer, you still get that error. So what's stopping you from like having the same behavior? The legitimate one asks you to keep anyway, and the backdoored one asks you still keep anyway. So there is no difference, right? So it depends on the reputation of the smart screen filter. It's because like the WebEx one, I think it doesn't have enough reputation from Defender. But it checks for code sign, which we will go on later on. So custom actions. This is the way on how we can backdoor MSI executables or legitimate MSI executables through custom actions. We can actually execute exe or system commands. We can drop VB-script, JavaScript, or even embed. We can even create our own MSI package. But we are here for the quick wins. So the quick wins is just backdooring existing ones. So you still have the icons, you still have the normal behavior, clicking next, 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 and then until finish. Right? So install execute sequence is a component of an MSI. It calls the custom action. So I'll have screenshots of this later on how we can backdoor an MSI package. So step 1, create a custom action. Then fill the values based on, based on our custom actions. So once we have that, those values, we just call the previous custom action. Then that's it. So easy. So we are now, right? So we are able to execute a VB script in an MSI installer. So without the user actually knowing it, because the normal behavior stays the same. You will be able to execute the MSI package. So drawbacks on this approach is when we have this one, sometimes it needs local admin access to install MSI packages. But this one is hard to detect because the event ID for this is too noisy when you monitor this one. So office stuff. Right now, it's hard to get initial access through macros unless it's inside an ISO container. So I'll just discuss like what still can be possible for initial access. Right now we see like OneNote, Excel files, and XLAM. and also some of the attack vectors like attaching a PDF with a link that is password protected zip file. So LNK1s, favorite of APT and threat actors. So it's a shortcut file. It's still a thing. I think there has been a surge of LNK files in 2021 or 2020. It's deadly effective inside ISO. So you can actually execute circutil, W script, C script inside LNK files. So Windows scripting host, this is like used as well by bootloader. We can execute as well JavaScript VBS. So same as the previous slide. For my advice and tips here is like when you have JavaScript, do not like payloads, JavaScript payloads. Do not like drop your payload without having it obfuscated or packed because it will get detected easily. So how do you build reputable payloads? What are the considerations that we must think about? So if we have like budget or resource for tooling, of course, we need to spend time on how we can actually create tools. Maybe consider a bit of malware development. Not really from scratch, but mostly for customizing our initial access payloads and everything. So we can use packers, obfuscators, and cryptors later on this. We can use code signing certificates. We can use legitimate ones. We can use leaked, spoofed, or even cloned ones. So we are now in the payload development fundamentals part. So this talk is not actually focused on malware development. There's a whole topic about that, but it is important we understand how these tools work so we can customize them. So we leave the heavy lifting to the heavy coders. So the other red teams, you can start off. Don't get discouraged if you can't assemble code in C, C++. Try to learn along the way. So you can use framework and tools developed by toolsmiths as long as you understand what you need to implement. So a brief introduction to Windows architecture. We have this called user mode and kernel mode, wherein an application, when it runs, it uses kernel 32, which is Win32 API. That kernel 32 Win API actually accesses function inside NTDLL. So it means that the lower level gets accessed by Win kernel 32. So this API allow developers or even software developers to interact within the Windows operating system to perform like various tasks that is required. So if the application is run again, it uses kernel 32. So it's documented. So undocumented functions are in NTDLL. So what am I talking about? So this is a basic snippet of code that is for shellcode execution. This doesn't have evasion. This doesn't have anything. It's just executing the shellcode, allocating memory using Win API. So this is just the basic structure. So there are plenty of ways to skin the cat, but this is just very basic one. So right. What else should I explain in this? So, right, so you've seen how we execute shell code previously. When we compile that code, it will get detected by anti-malware and antivirus, and probably and surely, sorry for that, surely it will be detected by EDRs. So anti-malware, the common ones, right? So we cannot really explain everything, but the common behavior or the common function of AV or anti-malware is detecting static signatures. As a red team, how can you combat against that? By implying or implementing packers, encryptors, and obfuscators. So, anti-malwares or AV solutions also have sandboxing. So you can detect anti-VM or debugging implemented in your implant. So for example, you have the shellcode execution previously. You can try to detect first if that machine or that system you are in has 8 gig of RAM. If it has less 8 gig of RAM, then it's probably a sandbox or a VM. So there are other ways to do that as well. So cloud-based analysis. Does anyone here have heard about file bloating? File bloating? Anyone? Yes? So file bloating is when you create a file that's so big, probably it won't be analyzed by cloud. It wouldn't be submitted to the cloud. So for example, above 100 MB, that is possible. So a good idea that some war stories previously, we did a 300 MB executable, zip it inside. So when it's zipped, when the user downloads it, it's like 500 to 800 kilobytes. So it get passed like web filters, it get passed with AV because it couldn't submit to the cloud, right? But every solution has a different limitation. Some AV or anti-malware solutions has only limits of 50 MB, some has 100 MB. Right? So basic shellcode encryption. Who here has used Metasploit? Shikata-ganai. So Shikata-ganai is an example of XOR. So malwares right now, modern malwares use AES. You can use libraries, you can use simple obfuscators. This line of code is implemented as well on the previous one. Let's say you want to encrypt the shellcode with XOR, and here is the key, 03838. So going back to our shellcode previously, let's go through the NT API. So remember that kernel 32 accesses function inside NT-DLL. So we can actually call native API directly. However, because it's undocumented, it's harder to find it because there are still resources on how we can find those NT APIs as well. So if we convert like our previous code, if we use NT API, virtual alloc becomes NT allocate virtual memory. Create thread becomes NT create thread X. Wait for single object becomes NT wait for single object. So the screenshot is quite blurry, but there are documentations for conversion of that. So how does this help, or what does this even mean? So some NT APIs have different functions that you can customize more so that you can create additional functions and routines. Basically, it's providing you more features than just Win32 API. So you gain lower level access that is not implemented. So that may evade some security solutions as well. So syscalls, we have direct syscalls and indirect syscalls. this is quite a heavy topic because we can go through numerous topics about direct and indirect syscalls. But in layman's term, or how we can get started with this is that treat direct syscalls as something like how you order food in the restaurant. So, for example, I order food in the restaurant. If it's a direct syscall that I wanted to convert into that analogy, I would go through the chef directly, right? So, indirect syscall, I'm still the customer. I go to a waiter. So the waiter processes the order and gets it to the chef. That's the main concept of direct and indirect syscalls. But if you want to go more detailed into that, I've included the reference as well. So later on, I'll discuss why is this relevant, because the way you understand these concepts, you can use the other tools and customize it as well. So we are now going to understanding the payloads. Let's go through the packers. Remember that how we can encrypt executables. You can use packers. So packers or software packers can provide obfuscation and encryption. Evades most signature-based detection. A good thing about this is that when you combine these packers, it has different results. So it's trial and error. So these are the tools that actually work. So Inceptor, it has multiple frameworks for AVN EDR evasion. It uses LLVM dash obfuscate. It's a very modern type of encryption that you can use for your payloads. These are the ones that are my go-tos on red team operations as well. So freeze is also a good one, and Nimcrypt and Nim syscall packer. Right. So getting to the point. So this one is a tool you can use to daisy chain packers. So let's say, for example, I want to use like Shikata Ganai. I know it's a bit. Can you see it? No, not really. The screenshot. I'll just revise it. So you can use multiple chains of packers. Once it gets outputted, it's a different one. So later on, I'll have a screenshot of like how it looks like on with multiple packers. Right, so digital certificates for binaries. So remember that earlier we discussed like the payloads, the MSI or executables not being able to bypass smart screen filters. One of the solutions for this is code signing. If you have code signing certificate, you can actually, if it has enough reputation, then smart screen or would not tag it as malicious. So native binaries of Microsoft are signed through the use of digital certificates as well. So in our red team operations, we can purchase code signing certificates. The problems with this is when we do a red team engagement, the logistics for this, when you obtain code signing certificate, you need to have like a hard token delivered to you. So it takes a lot of time. You will also lose some of your anonymity if you are emulating an APT group, because you need to have a credit card tied to your name. It goes through strict audit. So those are the trade-offs for purchasing or obtaining code signing certificate. So let's say that in your operations, someone reported your binary, your digital signature. So it would get blacklisted. Wasted money, for the operations. But some red teams have like their burn rate ratio, wherein it's okay if our code signing certificate gets blacklisted, we can just purchase again. So how other ways to obtain code signing certificates? So you can see there, pay for $700 a year for a cert, and the lower ones is use someone else's. 2 to 3 months ago, has anyone heard about like the MSI breach? None? MSI breach, MSI leaks. I think it was July or May. So Money Message Gang leaked private code signing certificates from MSI data breach. So under the leaked repository pages, there was a code signing certificate. You just need to brute force the password, and also you can look for the code signing certificate. But this one has been already revoked, so it means that it's not effective anymore. However, I think it's May. So May, June, July, if you have like the binary signed during that time, even though it's revoked, it will still be effective because you've already signed the binary. But right now, when you sign the binary today, it wouldn't work. So you can also search VirusTotal for these types of code signing certificates. So that's the query for that one. So what do I mean for this? It's not like just only the blue team that can take advantage of VirusTotal Enterprise. Red teams as well. We can search for code signing certificates there as well. So there's a debate on using code signing certificates. Like, is it ethical? Like using threat actor code signing certificate obtained certificates, is it ethical? So my opinion on that is that if we can get it, then threat actors can get it. So there's no point on like putting barriers on what we or we cannot do. So that's just my opinion on that one. So you can also search for public buckets like Grey Hat Warfare. Grey Hat Warfare is a searchable database for public SP buckets and so on. So you can see there's Amazon, Google Cloud, and so on. You can search for .pfx or .p12 code signing certificates. And also, where I get most of like the code signing certificates, Unknown Cheats is a game hacking forum. You can get a lot of code signing certificates here as well. So this was like 1 week or 10 days ago. I've just like uploaded my binary default Cobalt Strike payload in VirusTotal, packed with call obfuscate plus UPX. You can see only 10 antivirus engines detected it. Why not 72? So that's the power of using packers and multi-chain packers. So in the second one, 5 detections only, because the mere existence of digital signature can affect the AV engines. But when you search for it now, Cloud Engines has already updated their signatures. But the point is, the mere existence of code signing certificate can evade static signatures. So there's also this website, if you want to learn about malware development, Maldev Academy. This one, they've released a loader 5 days ago. So I can't remember how many days was it. But this full-blown loader is a total things of what we've discussed earlier. It involves indirect syscalls, DLL unhooking, and many more. So it's a more full-blown loader. This was an EDR. You can see that our callback is loaded. So what's the point of this? If we understand how to use like the tools, what we need, we would be able to evade security solutions. Therefore, our payloads will work for our initial access. So what was the point of that? Like 20 to 30 slides, what was the point of that? Code signing certificates leaked is double-edged sword. Because once it gets reported, the reputation of it goes down. AV, anti-malware engines will detect it. So you will be burned. However, if you want or need to evade or use only it for initial access, then you would probably delete it later on. So legitimate code signing certificates can evade smart screen, but not always, because it needs to build reputation as well. So packers can help increase reputation of payload, evading anti-malware or even EDR. However, too much chaining of packers, if it's too obfuscated, that's a red flag for EDRs. So for example, you use like 5 packers, daisy chain it, so you would see that if you upload it to VirusTotal, analyze it, you would see like 55 detections. So it's because too much packing is a red flag for anti-malware. So what was the point of that? We do not really need a fully undetected malware for initial access. We do not always need that. It's better if we have that, but if we have limited time, as a red team, we actually don't need a fully undetected malware. What we need is the thing, the payload that can evade initial access or that can evade initial security tools. So for example, our target organization had, through recon, we noticed that they used this specific EDR. Then we make a payload targeted to that EDR. Because every EDR or AV solutions has different ways of detecting malicious activity. If we generalize it, like create a malware base just like on the detection, then probably we would be get caught. So strategic payload hosting. So you can previously we would use like register a domain as a red team, register a domain, build reputation, have that site have whitelisted on vendors, make normal behavior, but that is traditionally slow. We can leverage popular trusted domains for payload hosting. Samples of this are Azure websites. It's listed in the Living Off Trusted Sites project. So you can use S3 buckets, but I am more successful with Azure blobs. So I think most people are actually getting victimized by this rather than S3 storages. But it depends on the organization. Right, so HTML smuggling, is it still a thing? So HTML smuggling works like this. So when the user opens an email, clicks on an HTML attachment inside the email, when the user clicks on the HTML attachment, browser opens and fetches the encoded JavaScript. The browser decodes the JavaScript and triggers the actions. So once that happens, the payload is assembled and dropped onto the device. Or even better, if we have the ability to not drop on the device, just trigger JavaScript actions, we can actually do something like this. So another thing is that we can also use ISO files. This is more probably what works in the last 3 to 6 months. Packing our payload inside an ISO or zip file. So this is just an article how threat actors actually do this as well. So if we're simulating APT groups, we can actually refer to how they do their payload delivery and development. Who likes meetings? Who likes meetings? No one? No one? No? No one? Let's skip this one. No one likes meetings. So, yeah. So, everyone has a meeting once a week. Right? So, everyone has a meeting once a week. I have a meeting once a week. So, what's the better payload delivery than calendar invites? Very effective one. Your C2 might be crazy, receiving 200 clicks for a town hall meeting. So let's say target company town hall meeting, right? So attendance is required. So I will say that I'm a technical guy. I will not be victimized by that. But when I'm too busy, I might get victimized by it. Even as a red teamer. So if you don't admit that, then probably you haven't seen a very good pretext yet. Right? So it depends on timing and execution. So what's the proper workflow for calendar invites? If you have an ICS5 calendar invite, the user opens an email, event to the calendar. So you can actually spoof attendees, adding more credibility onto that ICS file. I'll show that later. Imagine your CEO is attending the meeting. You need to accept, right? You need to accept that. Your manager is attending to the meeting. You need to accept that, right? So the good thing about this is that it sells your payload, right? It sells your marketing. So if you have a calendar invite, hey, you haven't accepted yet, the meeting started, so you will have an urgency reminder. So, let's say Zoom meeting. You have an attachment Zoom meeting. You prepare an HTML branded page, and then that's where your payload is. So, this is the point of this talk. If the user clicks on that, nothing happens, just returns blank page. What would the user do? Anyone? The user will report it as a phishing. So therefore, burning all our hard work as red teams. So for example, Joe is the one who clicked. Joe receives the email, he clicks it, and then nothing happens. What he will do is report that to the security team, triggering investigations, analyzing our malware, and then all our time developing the techniques, the bypasses, gets to waste because we didn't operate properly. So, how to operate properly? So, for example, we've sent the initial calendar invite. We monitor the clicks through Google Analytics. So, once you monitor the clicks, let's say you have callbacks already. After 5 to 10 minutes, send a cancellation meeting. So, do you track canceled meetings? Who tracks canceled meetings? So, no one, right? No one? Okay, so that's the thing. So, it's a covert strategy. Unsuspecting user behavior, not to trigger security investigations. Victims just go on to the day. Another meeting, another day, right? So, how does it look like? So, for example, all hands meeting, you can create a calendar file with the users actually spoofing the acceptance. So, for example, you've reconned in LinkedIn. The direct reporting manager was Robert, name Robert. You can add a field in part stat property that Robert has accepted the meeting. So that gets more reputation. So once they open the calendar invite, it will look like this. But below, you can see that it's hosted in S3. I've just mimicked the URL of Zoom so that it looks like similar. So what's the point of this? Right? Aesthetics matter. If it looks almost the same, users will click it. You get success. So what does the landing page look like? This is a spoof landing page that I've created from previous engagement. Does it look like normal? It looks normal on first glance. However, you can see that Zoom doesn't do that. Zoom meetings update required. It doesn't do that. It does the update in the client. Right? So this is the drop file. Right? You guys still with me?
Yep.
Good one? Good dog? Alright. How about having another variant? How about Microsoft Teams? Right? So for example, we send an email. It doesn't need to be smuggling. It doesn't need to be exactly as this. You have other options. This is a fake HTML that I've created. This is a fake landing page as well. This is the full page. You notice something different here. It looks the same as Microsoft Teams, but it also doesn't do something like this. It doesn't get you an install update button. It automatically updates, right? So Microsoft Teams automatically updates, but this one is intelligently crafted to look like that. It is crafted to look convincing. What else? Who uses Teams on a daily basis here? Have you noticed there is no help tooltip at the bottom? Why? Because I wasn't able to create it. So that's the only difference. That's the only difference of that. I wasn't able to create it. But more resources, more time, red teams can actually mimic the same page. So what's the next skill chain? So for example, it's a zip file. You can actually have the zipped ISO, have an LNK package with the hidden legitimate file. Then later on, I'll go to the installer packages. So to make it more legitimate, what's the surprise in the installer package? The installer package has a license file. Who cares about license file? Who actually inspects license files? That license file is 5,000 kilobytes. So, what's the point here? How do we deliver that license file? So that license file is actually being called from the LNK. So the Teams.exe shortcut, the user clicks. What happens to it is it copies the license to the directory, then performs DLL side loading attack. So initially we get initial access, we also get persistence. So what's the point of conhost? So it's just to delay the investigation. For example, it's called like process chain evasion, wherein the parent and child process doesn't really get noticed immediately because I've spawned multiple con hosts, and then it's before actually doing the X copy. So threat actors like CACBot and ICE ID actually do this stuff. You can actually not have DLL side loading. You can use a different vector, but this is a very intelligent one. So let's go to how the user sees it. The user will see it like this. So behind the curtains, the user is happy. The user is happy because Teams is updated. Teams is installed. If the victim doesn't have Teams installed, it will install it, continue to log him in. But behind the curtains, our payload, DLL, is actually copied, renamed, and ready for execution. After this, we receive initial callback. So the goals that we have achieved here, we have initial access and persistence. Every time Teams opens, we receive a callback. User is not suspicious. We don't trigger investigations. So putting it together, this is what happens. Alright, so what's the point of all of this? So the point of all of this is that easy wins for initial access is HTML smuggling, zip ISO. One key thing to consider is that if you make it too complicated, password protected, zip file, what else? So password protected zip file with PDF, multiple clicks will tend away the user. If you can go with lesser clicks, signed binary, so very straightforward, that's probably gonna get more victim. However, it might not evade security controls. But if you go the crazy way like ISO, zip, double zip, and then password protected PDF, the user might not be able to execute that. Right? So clicks matter here. So conference calls and meetings. So after this talk, you will probably inspect your meetings, right? You will probably inspect who invited you, right? So what links you click. Are your Teams updated? Are your Zoom meetings updated? So because of urgency and call to action, the meetings are highly effective. I've actually used this in 4 red team operations. The duration of those were like 2 to 3 months. It didn't get detected for those periods because of like the DLL side loading. DLL side loading is hard to detect unless there's a trigger to it. There's someone who reported it. There's different behavior. So landing pages and post-click events actually matter to avoid investigations and analysis. So too many clicks or execution might tend away the user. Right? So for example, I need to update this client, I have multiple clicks to go through. The user probably will just log out and ask a help desk to install it for him, right? But if you get it user intuitive, very easy, it would prove successful. So regardless if it's done on other meetings, WebEx, like that, this is effective. In my opinion and in my experience. So it depends on how you put it or put it all together. So what's next? So initial access operations. This is one of my favorite parts because after you land a shell or initial access shell, you don't go who am I, right? It's not like pen testing, like you go who am I. You go IP config, you go crazy, win peace, right? That's not how you would operate in a red team operations. In a red team operations, every command actually is being considered first before execution. So, first, do not run your operations on your initial access agent. It's because that if your initial access agent has been detected by web proxy or web filters and waiting for analysis, then they can connect that one. But if you drop another payload and like get it on another vector, process inject, reflective DLL side loading as well on another process, so that's what is better for OPSEC friendly. So don't sleep, zero or interactive. This means that you do not operate on a beacon very fast enough because it gets triggered immediately. Avoid dropping to disk if possible. Execute assembly. If you're familiar with that, it uses fork and run. You should use inline execute where possible. So spawn to another process and drop another payload. That's one of the tips. So after gaining initial access to remote systems, identify running processes, log in users, and the other stuff, right? So beacon object files, if you've heard about beacon object files, this is designed to be difficult to detect last year. However, I think 6 months ago, there are improvements that trigger in-memory scanning when you execute beacon object files, but mostly this is still not detected, but not 100%. So when you execute something like this on your operations, instead of using shell access, use beacon object files. Quick wins: domain credentials, password managers, recent files, and data mining emails. One of my favorite is data mining emails. Who loves like onboarding password change in 30 days, right? So you can ask nicely. So Ask Creds is a beacon object file tool where you can actually use it to collect credentials or Windows credentials. How it looks like is this. Have you ever encountered this? Like normal behavior. Have you ever encountered this as a normal behavior? A normal behavior when you have disconnected or like have intermittent connection to Outlook or VPN, you get asked about this one, right? So restore network connection. Making it better, have a prompt connecting to Outlook. It looks like this, right? So making it better, you can modify the tool itself to look like this. So simple wins for red teaming. You notice I just modified like this one. It doesn't really need enough in-depth knowledge. So I just replaced like the email and it looks better. It looks enticing. So data mining user emails. So it's this one is called Carbuncle. You can actually use this to interact with Outlook interop during red team engagement. The problem with this is that it uses Outlook programmatic access. It's very weird for like Notepad to access programmatically Microsoft Outlook. Maybe you can just inject in Outlook itself. So that way it's more operational security friendly for your operations. However, it's still being tagged for programmatic access. But this one, You can use it to search strings, confidential email, passwords. You can also search for intranet portals. So for example, red teaming village.ph internal portal was disclosed here as an example through the my data mining the user emails. So what's the point of this? So in the email of the victim, you can retrieve sensitive information that you can use for later operations. This is very helpful for users who have recently onboarded or recently joined the company. Alright, so that's it. Thank you for listening to this talk. I hope you find this informative. You can follow me here and on Twitter, LinkedIn, if you have questions. If you want me to send you a meeting invite, I can send you a meeting invite, right? So, I also teach at Gaiden as well. So, before we go to the questions, I just want to credit the people who actually made the work possible. So the codes that were used here was produced by the following people. So this is not my research, these are the contributions they made to the community. Offensive security tooling. If you want to learn about more advanced stuff, this was I wasn't able to cover. Click once and app domain manager injection, the new attack vectors for initial access. You can also check for smart screen filters and the other URLs here. So let's go back to questions. So,
question about the initial access with HTML smuggling. What if image security is able to detect and block RFA? Are there other defense evasion techniques you can do?
So mostly what we can do is obfuscation of JavaScript. That's why actually HTML smuggling is a thing. However, sometimes if you have the payload there already on the email, advanced threat protection or email security actually detects it right now. So that's why it's better to just point to another link. Use a JavaScript, then point to another link, but don't embed the main payload on HTML. But it still depends because some security gateways, it still goes through. It's just more on how you obfuscate the JavaScript inside the HTML. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Question lang about how purple teaming affects
Sorry, sir. One sec. So, for those who will ask questions, we have 2 shirts for Red Team Village. Can you give it to me, sir? I'll provide additional swag stickers. Sir, sorry, what's your name, sir? Kevin. Sir?
So questions are about
Thank you, sir. Question, sir.
question about how purple teaming may affect a red teamer, for example. So as we all know, in purple teaming you have to disclose your TTPs and methodologies with SOC, right? And TTPs and methodologies can be considered your trade secrets and as a red teamer because you developed it for a couple of years, right? So how do you handle this trade secret when it comes to engaging with the purple team?
Very good question. So I actually love that question. What's your name again?
Mel from Payload.
Mel. So actually, I do lead the Purple Team program in one of the organizations I've worked with. The problem is actually what he mentioned. So if you are working as a red teamer and also does the purple teaming, the problem is disclosing the trade secrets. So in purple team, there are types of purple team engagements that you can conduct. There are what we call micro simulation exercises. So micro simulation exercises, depending on the TTP, for example, credential access, you do variations of that, right? So you can conduct something like that. So you don't disclose your full trade of secrets, but remember that it still depends, but most generally how I handle that one is when we conduct purple team. It comes from the threat intel team on what TTPs we will be simulating, but we don't stray too far on it. Like, we keep it to the roadmap. Like for example, Crackbot. We don't apply enhancements on the Crackbot or like the malware. We just replicate what we can. Because the goal of the purple team is actually to not detect the exact binary or payload, it's to detect the behavior and to provide actionable items that can be immediately resolved to enhance like detection and content as well. So I don't have a shirt anymore. So I'm so sorry, guys. And we're so much over time. So other questions, guys? I don't think you're happy with the talk. So did you find it helpful? Alright, so thank you for attending the talk. You can come to me if you have questions. Thank you.